CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.
Hello, my name is Masego Madzwamuse. I am the host of the Adoye podcast series, season 2, that is part of our 2026 gathering, which is held in partnership with the Nawi Collective and the Center of African Philanthropy and Social Investment under the Adoye program. And we're bringing together a group of fabulous women, Pan-African feminists, 30 women who have come together for this writing retreat. And we are curating a space that recognizes writing as political work, storytelling as a site of healing, and community as essential to sustaining feminist thought and creativity on the continent. And through the podcast, you'll get to hear about the incredible work that the individuals who are part and who are participating in this year's retreat are involved in. Hi, welcome to the Adoye podcast series, season 2. And we are talking to a group of women who are part of the African Women's Writers Circle. My name is Masego Madzwamuse. I'm one of the conveners. And I have a guest that I have been wanting to work with again for a very long time. And I'm glad that this time around she could join us as one of our facilitators, as the main facilitator, writing facilitator, Karabo. And Karabo, I actually would like for you to introduce yourself to our viewers and our listeners by telling them who you are and whose you are.
Okay. I'm Karabo Kgoleng. That's who I am. Whose am I? That's an interesting question because it's a question of belonging. And I guess that's part of why I do what I do, is that quest for belonging. So whose am I on paper? I have parents. I'm South African, but I spent my formative years that shaped a lot of my consciousness and who I am in Botswana. I am also my precious child's mother. And I belong to a community of African women, past, present, and future, visible and invisible, whose stories have to find a place in the world, a place of power, a place of value, and again, a reinscription of their belonging. Because as African women, our belonging is under constant negotiation and assessment. You know, when you're born, and they say, it's a girl. Already, the honor of your father's family is literally on your body. And when you manage to keep that honor by avoiding assault and rape, as if it's something that you can avoid, you go on to reproduce your husband's people. As a bride, as a wife, as a mother. And there the constant negotiation is every meal that you make. How you navigate disagreements with your in-laws and all of that. So I think almost because of the social powers, the powers around us that dominate us and discipline us and control our movements, our belonging as African women is constantly tested, it's constantly under negotiation. So I think story is the one place where, and writing particularly, is the one place where we can claim our sovereignty in terms of who are we and whose are we. So I suppose in the greater scheme of things, the whose am I would be, I am of the generations past, present, and future of African women who deserve to have a place in the world. Yeah.
Absolutely. And you're in good company with the 30 women that we've brought together for this particular retreat. And you already begin to pull out a lot of the themes that are oscillating in the space that people are working on, and their whys. You know, your why overlaps with a lot of the participants and some of the writing that is beginning to emerge. And when we reached out to you, and we were really honored that you responded positively, we highlighted that for us, it was important to cover the space for women whom we know in the continent, from the continent, of the continent, who have expertise, whose stories matter, and simply do not have the resources, the time, and the space to sit with those stories and write. But at the same time, we also know that writing is a healing practice. And you already lift it when you answer, whose am I? And as a daughter, when I come into the world, you're thinking about how you stay safe. And not many people have necessarily been able to stay safe. So some of those themes are coming up. I don't want to really project your why you responded positively, but I would like to ask you to share with us why it was a no-brainer when we reached out to you. And
I was not going to say no to you. And this is what I do. You know, I'm a literary journalist. I'm a writing consultant.
yeah.
My calling is to give African women's words and words not just in terms of African literature, the cultural form or the cultural product, but even the scientific work that African women are doing as scientists, as scholars in many different dimensions. So I'm also, I trained, so in terms of my practical training, I trained as a writing consultant under Professor Pam Nichols at the Wits Writing Center. And then I also am a certified science communicator through nature research. So, and I'm a journalist.
Yes.
So my journalism and my communication is very intentional and very political in that sense.
Yeah.
And it comes from a place of seeking epistemic justice, because the validity of our knowledge is constantly questioned to the point where we even internalize that. So even with these workshops, having the opportunity to walk with women who've already accomplished a lot and are doing so much good for society, to help to walk with them in that realizing that their knowledge is powerful. Because, you know, one of my favorite songs is by a Nigerian singer, Ashake. It's called Lonely at the Top.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And it does get lonely at the top.
It does get lonely at the top.
And also you're holding everyone. So to be part of walking with other women and walking with them in that process of reclaiming themselves. Because also as we climb in our careers, there are a lot of things that we're forced to leave behind because of the other things that take priority. And it does affect your writing.
Yes.
You know, for me, for example, my journalistic writing is a different kind of brief. which comes at the expense of my own personal creative writing. It becomes reportage and critique, where now I become that with myself. People who work in policy, when they're writing policy documents, there's a particular kind of discourse and tone and narrative that achieves that purpose, that meets the brief. And heaven knows, there's evidence, we excel at that. But there's that soul and right to the soul of who you are that brought you to this in the first place, that drove you to be this excellent. Where this process is where we reclaim that and create stories that write to who we are beyond, above and beyond the work that we do, the titles that we have, whether, according to our roles, be it in our work, in our communities and in our private lives. So for me, that's why it was a no-brainer. I got really excited that, because even creating the program for me, it was a process of doing that. How do I do that with the most meaningful impact, where I can be excited by participating in it myself?
Yeah. And many of us have had so many breakthroughs with you. I think one of the things that you lift for us around epistemic justice is one, that epistemic justice itself resonates, because a lot of the women who've turned up in this space do work in different sectors, and there's something that is deep, that is different and is authentic and centers Africa and people's lived realities, where a lot of the participants feel the space to really explore that is limited. But it's also about writing in a way that becomes part of the public discourse and takes away the science. Not really takes away the science, but really takes the message outside of the silos that we tend to be in. Writing in dry scientific language, or writing about nature through a lens that separates us from nature. And you're helping us to lift that, to lift that. And I wonder if you can pull out some of the tools that you've been sharing with us to help us excavate.
Yes. So again, with the cohort of women who are participating in this retreat, the skill is already there. The skill is already there, but while we are chasing the deliverables, which is securing funding for the next project, meeting a deadline, fighting a court case, in the pursuit of that deliverable, you're writing in a very linear way with the end goal in mind. And that's where you need to call back the things that we know as assumptions. So I'll give you an example. The workshop on narrative sovereignty was all about active voice and passive voice. And we all know what that is, right? And we take it as a given.
Yeah.
I know active voice and passive voice. And, I have to use passive voice for this to protect the innocent or the vulnerable. I'll use active voice when I'm making a particular demand or I'm showing agency. So what more is there to it? It's like, okay, let's step back and start at the beginning again with a basic, simple sentence, and then add layer to it. How do you make the active voice more powerful in a sentence beyond just saying, Masego entered the room? Start to paint a tableau. So now you're activating the African storytelling narrative beyond just a dry, a dry linear descriptor, right? So you bring in metaphor, which is a very, which is quite a centering, it's African-centered form of storytelling. You describe the room. you add senses to it, make it sensory, a sensory, like add some, life through senses to it. And that's how you enrich that active voice, and why it works so much, why it resonates so much more than the passive voice.
Yeah.
And then when you do decide to employ a passive voice, or decide to cover your sentence with a kind of veil, instead of it just being flat and passive, how do you infuse that with mystery?
Yeah. Yeah.
You use the passive voice, for example, when you're writing a story that will have a cliffhanger.
Yeah. I think the aha moment in that workshop was what you said about, it wasn't so much the technique of it, but tapping into the active voice as a political act.
Yes.
Because it's about reclaiming one's agency, and also being very clear about where accountability lies for a lot of the issues that we tend to deal with. You gave an example about how one might write about rape,
Yes.
and that when we actually use passive language, we then mask and are protecting the perpetrators and not breaking the cycle of violence. And there's a lot of work that people are writing as liberatory practice, and as a practice of recalling, archiving, reclaiming histories that have either been made invisible or simply not written. And I really thought that was really, really powerful. There's something that you shared with me about when we were talking about particularly writing about the liberation history in our continent, what is known, what is not known. And you shared with me another technique, which you said was largely feminist in nature, and that is exploring with speculative.
Yes.
What was the term?
Yeah. So it's the speculative art,
Yes.
right, is an African feminist practice, in the sense that by necessity, because it looks to fill in the gaps where memory has been erased. But you have to ground it with a particular intention, that you're doing it with respect. And it's also a form of using your authority, your creative authority, to help fill in those gaps. So where you have a piece of narrative nonfiction, be it a memoir or a biography, where there are gaps in the narrative that do not do justice to the story, or that render the story too flat, then you can develop a tool where you can use your creative authority and license to use fiction to lean into those gaps, and not necessarily fill them out solidly, but to add imagination and to weave in, almost as if you're infusing them with the spirit of those who were there at that time.
Yes.
Using different linguistics and stylistic techniques. So there's a workshop where the practice is genre cross-pollination, where such a practice is useful with nonfiction, using fictional stylistics to lean into the non-fictional narrative, to fill in the gaps in memory. And then with the fiction, where the story and the characters appear to be too flat, or the plot too predictable, you fracture it using poetry stylistics, which can actually be very strict. So if you have a scene of something unfolding with a central character, but just narratively speaking, it's too flat, although it's part of the plot, part of the story. You break it up by using poetic techniques. So either you make them rhyme, or you create spaces. You use rules like your iambic pentameters. So with fiction that's flat, you lean into poetics. With nonfiction that needs a little bit of life, you use the stylistics of fiction to kind of feed into that. So at the time of recording this podcast, that's the workshop that's happening tomorrow. So I'd already treated you to that in our consultation.
Yes.
I was already encouraging you to think in that way.
Yeah.
And then the exercises, there'll be more exercises that speak to that. Because that's how I'm assisting a lot of our nonfiction writers in terms of them adding richness to their nonfiction writing.
Because there's a lot in this cohort that are doing narrative nonfiction work. But what I really like about what you've been doing with us is the unlearning. I mean, at the moment you're talking about the techniques.
Yes.
What people don't know is when we are actually in the room, what you're really talking to us about is how to break all the rules that Western forms of writing have taught us, right?
Yes.
And you're encouraging us to tap back into our own oral histories, our own languages, our own idioms, ways in which we say the secular nature of storytelling that is so liberating and allows us to connect. It gives us the freedom and the space to connect the issues and the themes that we are all exploring.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because of course you know the rules. That's how you got your PhDs and your master's degrees. That's how you got to be in the positions that you sit at in incredibly important organizations. But an opportunity such as this with the writing retreat is that first, it's a space where we're safe to do that, where our mastery of the linear colonial hierarchical thinking is not even brought into question. We already got that, but it came at a price. And that price is also what blocks us in terms of going back to the work that we do and finding innovative solutions, whether it be policy direction, whether it be tech, whether it be applying your practice in a different way that's more inclusive or that's more caring, and that's how you find those solutions when you start tapping back into that thinking, into that technique, and into the process that takes you back to yourself, that brings in your ancestors, because we are looking for, and that is what we're doing is finding an African solution to African problems using an African problem-solving technique, which is storytelling, right? Yes. But we take the tools that we have and then we think about how can we repurpose them, and also play. The workshops are very rigorous, but it is so beautiful when you see the lights go on. You know, where someone looks up and goes, yeah, what, would you like to say something? She's like, no, I got it. So I was like, oh, yay. And it was there all along.
Yes.
That's the thing. It was there all along. Yeah.
It's when the lights go on and when the floodgates open.
Yes, it's also when the floodgates
open. There's a lot of floodgates.
There's a lot of that. Yeah.
There's a lot that we're grieving.
Yes.
In terms of stories not told. And history is not honored.
Yes.
Moments not honored. But also like a future. I think a lot of people here sit with this sense of urgency and a responsibility to get the stories out as you know, we all think about future generations. Many of us here are mothers, aunties, and so forth. As we wrap up, 2 questions, which is one, talking about African solutions to African problems, is perhaps you can share with us what themes are coming out of this workshop that you're most excited about, themes in terms of things that people are exploring, so people can come back to this space later and be looking to see what written works have come out. That's one. And then actually, let me ask you this question. I'll come back to my second one.
So one really powerful theme that's emerged is family. And so I've seen this particularly with women who are looking at the big social problems of the politics, civic education, gender-based violence, and communicating in a compelling way to that awareness raising. And they're wondering why their message is not getting across. And they realize that, there's something that happened to me or something that happened in my family that has been a point of silence, imposed silence, that if you name it, you're going to destroy everything. Everything's going to burn, right?
Yes.
But it's when you tap into that, then it's the floodgates, then you can write to it. Second one is language. That what I'm trying to say, the English is just not, it's not driving it. It's not landing.
Yeah.
Because it's English.
Yeah.
So you understand the words, you recognize them and what they markers for what they mean, but now you need to take the message, but translate it, move it from English to the language of the community that you're serving, which is your own community. And I found it remarkable where many participants said, I learned to write really well and to be a leader in my area of work, but I learned how to do it in English. And already that creates a psychic and a spiritual, and by necessity, a communicative distance, which is why a lot of these messages are not landing. So, and don't think about, is somebody flying on me? So a lot of that is when we find the bravery, because a lot of that anxiety is that what we lost by mastering English was to think and to present abstractive and even political ideas in our mother tongues and the tongues of our fathers, right? Because also there's been very little language development politically that keeps up with technology and in the language of policy and politics in the world that we operate in. Like, for example, my area of formal scholarship, my practice is journalism, and my training is communication. But in terms of my academic and intellectual scholarship, it's in migration and displacement. I don't know how to say critical discourse analysis in Setswana.
Yes.
And there's a grief there.
Yeah.
Because I can win in articulating a particular argument and making a case for why the best way to analyze this is to do research in this habitus. But I can't say that in Setswana. Then how does this research then end up benefiting the people that I am doing it for, including myself? It ends up sitting in a colonial university's archive, or it's used to speak back to us from outside. At best, it gets us some funding for projects, but at worst, it reinforces the anthropological colonial gaze on our problems. And it's almost as if it's like trauma porn for the West, right? These sad and unhappy people. Yeah.
The harm is even worse when you actually have to go back to your people as part of the research to ask the questions, but not have the right language.
Yes.
Right? The limitations in translating those concepts to our language as part of the source of data collection. And that's where the misnaming of issues happens and the anthropological gaze is perpetuated.
And when we decolonize our sentences and use methods such as code switching, is that we're actually creating a new language.
Yes.
We're creating a new language for this time.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's a really exciting.
That's really, really exciting. And on that note, as the last thing as we wrap up was what recommendations would you make for people who might want to read written works and examples of, say, narrative fiction or fiction that is written in these very liberatory ways that you've been talking about?
When it comes to African literature by women, we are so blessed and so spoiled for choice. Yeah. You've got the ones who are the canon already, like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I used an example of how she uses polyvocality in Half of a Yellow Sun, which is a fictional text, but it's a historical fiction that it's set in the Biafran War. You've got storytellers like Violet Bulawayo with We Need New Names, right? How she's telling a generational story as part of a coming of age narrative, and transnationality. Yes. In terms of where is the best place to realize a dream, and does you getting your dream mean that you have to give up your name? Right? We are so spoiled for choice. And then in terms of kind of the more creative narrative non-fiction writers that I find really compelling, are a lot of writers of memoir and essayists. Mona El-Tahawi, for example, she uses a lot of braided essays in her missives about injustice, where she speaks to the personal, she speaks to her family, and then she's also looking at the grand narrative, when she got caught up, with the violence in Tahrir Square, and she was tortured and all of that, but she's still able to write with this humor, and she's able to inject it in, to inject the humor, but also she calls out the oppressor, but she laughs at them at the same time, and then right now, most recently, is Lebo Mazibuko. I have to go back to her again because Your Fabrics of Love. Yes. She really...
You shared that this morning, yeah.
I mean, there she uses polyvocality as well, where there's a particular period that is very defining in terms of South Africa's post-apartheid or early democratic history socially. So it's the Kwaito era, the early 2000s, the I Have a Dream. I mean, not I Have a Dream, I Am an African.
Yes.
That era of South Africa. But coming of age, and for women of different generations and different levels of belonging in this family, and how they report on how these events have impacted on their relationships and on the decisions that they make and the direction that the family goes in.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Karabo. And one of the things that we'll be doing is curating a list of resources for people to be able to go back to and excavate this wealth of wisdom that we have in our continent as they explore their works. Once again, Mera Leboga, for you having joined us. This is Karabo Kgoleng. She is one of our writing facilitators at the African Women's Writers Circle, the 2026 cohort. We're really grateful for you. And I am Masego Madzwamuse, and this is the Adoye podcast, brought to you courtesy of CAPSI, the School of African Philanthropy Studies at the Wits University, in partnership with the Nawi Collective.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to the CAPSI podcast series, Conversations on African Philanthropy.